Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news.
This is Faith Under Fire. Each Thursday on Family Life, we give voice to religious battlegrounds in this nation. I'm your host, Tracy Lynn. With us today, ministry leader and author, Phil Waldrep. There are many things that can hinder our walk with Christ and other relationships. One of those is betrayal. Betrayal affects us on a really deep personal level. What is it about betrayal that makes it such a life-altering experience?
Well, betrayal shatters our trust. And when someone has betrayed you, you start thinking, well, if I didn't see this one coming, maybe there's another one coming. So you put a question mark over every relationship you have. And that's not healthy, because trust is the very essence and the main ingredient of a healthy relationship. And if we don't process our betrayal in a healthy way, we're going to end up having unhealthy relationships.
Phil, would you tell us a little bit about your own experience with betrayal?
Sure. 20 years ago, I was betrayed by a friend, a colleague, an employee, someone that I trusted and loved like my own brother, and never thought he would betray me. But he did some things. They were not illegal per se, but they were immoral and unethical, and had to leave our organization. But in the process of that, I was left shattered. I was affected emotionally, financially, spiritually, and I realize now, looking back, that there were some things that I did well and some things that I did not do well. And I wanted to be able to help people to process their betrayal, to give them hope that, you know what, you can get through the pain of your betrayal and come out on the other side happier and healthier than you were before the betrayal.
That is good news. You know, when we've been betrayed, we feel hurt. That's one of the first emotions. And then we also feel angry. And we know Jesus got angry, for example, with the money changers at the temple. What are some healthy ways that we can express anger?
Well, when you've gone through a betrayal, you do go through a state of shock and denial, but you do get angry. You may not act on it physically, but inwardly, you're angry. And you can also reach a point where you become bitter and revengeful if you're not careful. Remember, the Apostle Paul said we could be angry and sin not. God gave us anger as a way to initiate change. But when you've gone through a betrayal, if you do not process your anger in a healthy way, then you're going to have some unhealthy things happen. And in my book, Beyond Betrayal, I talk about some of the ways you can do it very practical, but let me give you one. One of the ways that I did it was I took out paper and pencil, and I literally wrote what I was feeling. I even wrote what I wanted to do. I knew I would never act on it, but I vented my anger on paper. And by venting my anger on paper, I was then able to shred it, throw it away, get rid of it. And the reason why that was healthy is it allowed me to express my anger, but I did not harm people or other relationships as I was expressing the anger that I felt.
That's huge. Phil, resentment often creeps in when someone has been betrayed. Why is it a bad idea? And how does isolation play into the whole resentment factor?
When you go through a betrayal, you're hurting. And you immediately think, I never want to experience this pain again. So we isolate ourselves, or as I like to express it, we begin to build a wall around our heart. Because if we don't let people in, we think, then we can never be betrayed and we can never be hurt. But if you build a wall high enough to keep people out and to keep pain out, you built a wall high enough to keep love from getting in. And we are designed and made by God for relationships. If God did not want us to have relationships, He would have made millions of islands and given every one of us our own private island away from everyone else. But He didn't do that. He made us for relationships. But when you isolate yourself and you build that wall and love cannot get in and people cannot get close to you, the result is we become very lonely. We can even become discouraged and depressed because we want people to love us, but in pushing away the pain, we push away people and we push away love.
For your book, Beyond Betrayal, you really dug deeply into Scripture. What would you say are some of the best Scriptures you found for moving beyond broken trust?
Well, initially, I studied so many of the Bible characters who went through betrayal, not just Jesus with Judas, which is an excellent example on how to handle a betrayal, but Joseph in the Old Testament was another one. He was betrayed by his brothers. He was betrayed by his boss's wife, who falsely accused him of some things. He was betrayed by a man in prison who promised he would never forget Joseph, and then he forgot him. And then one of the passages, or several passages that helped me, were some of the Psalms that David wrote who went through betrayal. You know, Psalm 41, he writes about the betrayal of one of his most trusted counselors who turned against him and went with his son Absalom and revolted. And David wrote about that in Psalm 41. But there's several other times when David put to paper what he was feeling. I think Psalms, in many ways, is David's journal. He lets us see what he was feeling and how he felt. And he was a man after God's own heart. Then I realized, too, that I needed to be reminded of my worth to the Lord. Instead of listening to what the betrayer said, I had to listen to what God said. So passages like "You're fearfully and wonderfully made," verses that reminded me of how God has a plan for me and how much He loves me. All of those scriptures together reinforced what I needed to hear, which was contrary to what the betrayer was telling me and what the devil was telling me about the betrayal.
That's great. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our listeners, Phil?
I want people to know that there is life beyond a betrayal. And remember, when the Japanese culture, when a piece of pottery was broken, they didn't throw it away, they repaired it. But in order for that to work, especially 100 plus years ago, they had to make an epoxy with something that included gold. And the pieces of pottery from the Japanese culture that's over 100 years old that has been repaired with that epoxy of gold is worth more than a piece of pottery that's never been broken. So if today you're shattered and you're broken, I want you to know if you'll let God's love put your life back together, you will come out on the other side healthier and happier than you've ever been, and you can get beyond betrayal.
That's Christian Conference leader Phil Waldrep. I'm Tracy Lynn, Family Life News.